Açık, Veri ve Yapay Zeka oturumu yönetmek üzere Yapay Diplomasi Komisyonu üyesi, AB İşleri uzmanı, kıdemli yapay zeka politika uzmanı Sayın Çiğdem Akın alkışlarınızla sahneye davet ediyorum. Heyecanlı bir oturum bizi bekliyor gibi robotlarla birlikte hoş geldiniz. Ve konuklarımızı da hemen anons etmek isterim. Konuşmacılarımız Kişisel Verileri Koruma Kurumu Yapay Zeka Departmanı Başkanı Sayın Roberto Lattanzi, Yapay Zeka ve Siber Güvenlik İş Stratejisi Sayın Eugene Popescu, Dijital Hümanizm ve Yapay Zeka Merkezi İcra Direktörü Karin Kons, Veri Yönetimi ve Yapay Zeka Politikası Uzmanı Veronica Cretu alkışlarınızla sahnemizdeler efendim. Oturumumuzu ben sahneye bırakıyorum, devrediyorum Çiğdem Hanım'a.
Okay. Sorry, ilk önce Türkçe başlamak istiyorum izninizle. Kıymetli hazırun, sabrınız için ayrıca teşekkür ediyoruz. Karin buraya oturmak istedi. Ben de onların arasında sizinle burada yüz yüze sohbet imkanı buldum. Sağ olsun. Birazcık daha sabrınızı rica edeceğim. Kısa bir oturum olacak. İzninizle bundan sonra İngilizce devam etmek istiyorum. So good afternoon everyone joining us here and online. Welcome to our panel. We will be talking about open data and AI, and we have our distinguished speakers from different parts of Europe actually today. And I was planning to introduce them to you in detail, but I don't want to keep you long before lunch. So they are well-known experts in their areas of study, so welcome again. Thank you for being with us. So Veronica, I'd like to start with you, if that's okay. You're an independent consultant in tech and governance, and actually you are the expert on open data. As you know, UNESCO says open data is a must for AI. EU says there's a symbiotic relationship between the two. So could you tell us why open data is important in the field of AI and its role within the bigger picture, I mean, in the digital governance framework?
Thank you. I have a couple of slides. Let's see if this works. Okay. I don't see this working. Okay. Yeah, first of all, hello, and it's a pleasure and honor to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation, and congratulations for this wonderful event. Indeed, I think the topic of open data is not new. It has been, I think we have more than a decade, actually about 15 years or so we were talking about open data more actively. But let me first, I hope this works. Let me first take you to a really interesting story that is impactful from many standpoints of view. And I think it also resonates with the conversations earlier this morning about the role of AI for the healthcare sector. So imagine London, 1854. Just try to visualize London of the 1854. It was in the middle of a cholera outbreak. And basically what happened, a renowned epidemiologist back then, Dr. John Snow, there were many attempts to identify the root cause of the cholera back then. So what he did, unlike many scientists and many practitioners back then, he tried to identify, to map the data that was related to a certain neighborhood. So he was looking at the highest death toll in a particular area, and he put the data on a map, and basically he came to the conclusion that while we are talking about the same neighborhood, there were some households that had highest death tolls and others didn't have at all. So when he put that data on a map, he came to identify emerging patterns. He saw that a certain number of death tolls are connected with a water supplier, with a certain pump. So basically, This was a breakthrough exercise because by mapping the data and putting all that information together, he helped identify the root cause, and that is actually the year when cholera was recorded for the last time in the UK. Unfortunately, it's not the case today. I checked this morning, I think globally we have 16,000 cholera cases still around the world. Last February, I spent about 2 weeks in Zimbabwe, and Harare was also badly hit by cholera. It's very sad that today we are still dealing with this epidemic, but I think working more closely with data and looking at the root cause is really something transformational and impactful for the public policy. The reason I'm bringing this case and this exercise, and I'm sure there are many others out there. Data has to really serve a purpose. It doesn't matter that we talk only about data, open data or big data. We really need to understand what is that something that we can do with it. And if you look on this screen, you see various emerging needs that governments around the world are voicing when it comes to their needs, public administration's needs in terms of data. I spent last week in Baku, in Azerbaijan, working with 3 public entities around data-driven decision-making. So we need to understand what kind of data brings meaningful and insightful contributions to the decision-making processes. Where we talk a lot today about the SDGs, how we are tracking the SDGs, and we still complain that we are so far behind achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, and that is because probably we're not doing a good job in terms of mapping and collecting the right types of data. So there are different uses and different purposes that we need to keep in mind when we talk about data overall. And a very, very brief story of the open data. By the way, how many people in this room have been involved in open data initiatives in Turkey throughout the past years? Anyone has done anything on open data in Turkey? Turkey? No hands up, okay. Okay, so, but I have to tell you that I checked, you have several municipalities in Turkey that have open data portals. So I think there is a lot that you can build on your own data. But on the open data, in 2013 and 2015, we had 2 open data barometers. Turkey was also part of those assessments. But then in 2017, there was the last assessment on open data, and it was a limited edition. It was just a number of countries that were part of that. And then there was a break. Then we had no idea what was happening in the open data space. And in between, I think, 2011 to 2017, we've seen an emergence. It was a boom. Governments around the world were talking and, boasting with their open data portals. They were doing open data hackathons. There was so much going on. The government of the country I am originally from, Moldova, Republic of Moldova, in 2012 we adopted one of the breakthrough methodologies for publication of open data. And I remember one of the officials, senior officials in government, he said, we know that opening data and open data is painful, but we want pain, so we go for that. So basically they mandated every public institution to open up to 3 data sets minimum per month. Was it an impactful, was it a sustainable process? In 2020, 2021, we tried to understand what was happening in the open data space through the lens of the Global Data Barometer. Global Data Barometer is the first attempt after the open data movement to try to understand how countries are doing in terms of their initiatives on open data. And you see, no country scored above 70 out of 100. Average score was just about 38 points out of 100. We see that only 10% of the data sets met all the open data criteria. We see that since 2016, the growth of open data initiatives have been stagnant, and there was some emergence of national initiatives here and there, but those were more sporadic efforts. So all in all, through the Global Data Barometer, we came to some of the conclusions that open data requires explicit frameworks. It requires a really clear capacity across public institutions, capacity building, data literacy, and so on. Here is just to mention that globally, we have about 170 both national and local governments that have adopted or they opted in to the Open Data Charter principles, which really explicitly state what is that something that the principles and what is that something that governments at national and local level could benefit from. So all in all, I think one of the most important lessons for me is that regardless the boom and why the boom has not been sustained, because open data should not be a separate, isolated, in silo agenda. It has to really deliver public value. It has to be part of a broader, comprehensive data governance framework. And as you see here on the screen, this is an attempt on my end, and I've piloted this approach in 3 countries around the globe. And as you see, open data is just a tiny element of the broader data governance framework. It's one of the elements under the data, knowledge, and value creation. So open data has meaning and purpose as long as we can extract value, as long as we can generate insights that are meaningful for the decision-making processes, for the policy development, for the evidence-based policy making, and so on. And in terms of this particular data governance framework, I just shared that I implemented it in a number of countries. It's a maturity framework that helps you look on a scale from 0 to 4, and then across all the pillars and all the elements, I have defined certain characteristics for each level. And the reason this is important, and this is an example of the results from one of the countries where this has been implemented. If you have the right diagnostic tools in place, you know exactly where you are, you know exactly what you need to prioritize, and you see the value here where we exactly have the open data is having 2.16%, which means there is so much that particular government can do in terms of extracting value from data and accordingly contribute to other pillars of the broader data governance framework. So all in all, I think the main takeaway from, I think in 10 minutes, this is like an experience of 15 years. The main takeaways is that open data has to be part of a broader comprehensive framework. To understand where you are, you really need to have robust methodologies in order to be able to prioritize interventions, initiatives, and really, yes, we often talk about best practices, replicating. I hear all the time government officials asking, can you tell us what this country is doing or that country is doing? That is all interesting stuff, but I think what it is important for every single administration is to know where exactly it stands in relationship, not only with open data, but when it comes to the main pillars of the data governance framework, because that is something that will influence a lot. AI depends on high quality, ethical, reusable data. So the quality of the AI solutions that you are going to deploy will very much depend on the robustness of the data governance framework that you have overall in your public administration. And I think I really enjoyed, the way you applauded and supported the young people here, those who have taken capacity building programs. I think one of the key enablers is capacity, capacity, capacity. We need to train and have whole of government approach, and that is when all those emerging gaps in terms of open data and understanding the value that it could generate, both for the private sector but also for the public sector, they would be harnessed at maximum. So yeah, this is very brief, and over to you. Thank you.
Definitely. You were brief. You summarized your key takeaways. Thank you very much. You mentioned also Turkey. Thank you. We also have digital framework We also give importance to open data, but we are trying to take digital governance issue within a holistic approach, but as part of our policy, we have data strategy and many instruments related. We will talk about it later, I hope. When we look at open data, yeah, it has many benefits. It fosters innovation, and so economic development, citizen engagement, guarantees transparency and accountability, but there are also risks. For instance, when we combine different sets of open data, it may become possible to re-identify personal data. Here, Roberto, you are the head of AI division at Italian Data Protection Authority. Should we be concerned about protection of our personal data in open data sets? And could you perhaps give us some insights from a new perspective? Thank you.
So good morning, many thanks, Chignan. First of all, let me thanks for the kind invitation from your side and from the IPA as well. It's always nice to be back in Turkey, in your country. And yes, I have followed with interest, I would say, yes, the work yesterday and today, and I was quite impressed by the numbers, how artificial intelligence can help in order to improve the efficiency, the speed, the economy, the technological power, even national security applications. Okay, the legal side was a bit apart. And in the discussion, I would say, there is something that only or mainly our robot has said during the intervention. The robot has said is not only about technology, but we are speaking about a techno-social issue. So what is relevant, at least on our side, first of all, is that we are not just speaking about something that works, that functions, that optimizes a process, but is something that involves, in many cases, not always, but in many cases, also the life of the individuals, of groups within the society, young and elder population. So, and now we come to, and when you have told to us, okay, we want to speak about open data. Okay, open data usually, as was said before, starting from the example in England, is not related, usually, is not related to individuals. It starts from individuals, but what is relevant exactly in this example was not to know that Mr. Green and Mr. White was with a given health condition and where they was located, but the pattern that using this data you are able to raise. And this is the value, okay, of the open data and AI. But then we have wanted to put another issue, that is this data protection, that is the protection of fundamental rights together. And you know, the room is getting closer and closer, less space. We don't have only one actor, that is open data, so this general interest. We don't have only artificial intelligence that is going to maximize this interest, but we have also the individuals. And if we think to the Convention on Artificial Intelligence of the Council of Europe, where Turkey was part of, we met there, you remember, and then we said, okay, it's not only on fundamental rights, but it's also on rule of law and democracy. And if you think what was happening in your country, in Romania, concerning, it's the first case in the world when an election has been made invalid by a constitutional court. It means we are not anymore speaking in only theoretical perspective about the impact of artificial intelligence. Now, coming back to the open data, is open data so a joker, a card that means you can always use them, there is no problem for individuals? I will say that is not in this way. Okay, without saying that you cannot use open data, I would say is exactly the opposite, but being responsible, being accountable of the use that you do. In the European Union, I'm going very quickly a vision about that. The issue in legislative terms, my legal background, so I apologize for that in the family. is that, as you see, starting from 2003, we had three legal interventions at major level concerning the open data. And the idea was to make the use of this open data, as has been said, in order to promote transparency at the beginning, but even to prompt the market in using this data for the social benefit, I will say. And if we go into the details, I don't want to spend too much time into the details, but we see that in each of these interventions, the data protection interest was to be preserved with other interests. So it means you can use the data, but in the meantime, at least in the European legal framework, you have to protect the fundamental rights of individuals. What is interesting in our perspective is that in 2019, that there was the third release of the open data, we can see in the recital of this directive that is popping up artificial intelligence. Before it was not there. This is not the first case, it's the second one. There was a directive on non-personal data in 2018 when artificial intelligence is mentioned. It's the first time when in EU-level documents you mention together with, and it's not by chance, the open data, also the issue of the artificial intelligence. It means that artificial intelligence needs, as you all know, and you all teach to us, data, personal data, only data, data in the middle. Okay, we can discuss this point, but in order to train a model. And we find here 3 or 4 times the use of artificial intelligence, I would say, very long before the adoption of the Artificial Intelligence Act that was in 2024. So that's the history in the European Union. I don't want to stay in the details here, but this is the main message. When then you move to the Artificial Intelligence Act, so the regulation that has been adopted at EU level last year, then you find again that something is made clear here, is that you can use artificial intelligence, but again, you have to protect the personal information, so the data protection and the private life of individuals. It means that it's difficult, but what we try to find in the EU legal framework is to enjoy all the potentiality coming from the innovation. We are not speaking only about innovation, we are speaking about safe, sustainable innovation. It means that it has to look to the environment, it has to do with the fundamental rights of individuals. It's not the technology in itself. In this perspective, if we can enlarge a bit the framework, we are in the middle between US and China. We are not looking at innovation in itself, but to a kind of innovation. Theoretically, it's easy to say, practically, it's difficult to do. How this can be done? There is some hints in this directive that we are mentioning. One is anonymization. So the people that is working in this area, if there is a technological application concerning individuals and groups, as here we are not only speaking about, I don't want to speak about privacy, but there is also the issue concerning the group privacy. Obviously, that is quite relevant. So the anonymization is the first thing to mention. The second one is the purpose limitation. You cannot use a data set for a purpose that is against the original connection. So you have to take in mind this when you go to use this kind of data set, even for training algorithms. And the third point is, how can I put this concern in the machine, in the design, I would say, in order to have an ethics by design or privacy by design tools. You could do, and this was coming from the data protection law, that we said traditionally a data impact assessment. So how the technology can have an impact on the rights of the individuals. And now, if you come back to the Convention of Artificial Intelligence, that is relevant for Turkey as well, it's not the EU-level legislation, it's this framework convention that is open from the North America to the Japan. So it's very wide, potentially, and we hope also, in fact, if you look there, you will find the fundamental rights impact assessment. That is the work that is ongoing at the Council of Europe. Last week, there was a representative of your country, as I was there for Italy, in order to try to improve this model that helps the people that is working in this area in order to say, okay, I have to introduce this artificial intelligence tool. Have I some problem with what kind of values? I come back, fundamental rights, not only data protection, democracy, and rule of law. I will stop here. Thanks.
Thanks, Roberto. It's always a pleasure listening to you. I hope we can continue later on. Thank you. Karin, so I'd like to turn the floor over to you. You are the Executive Director of DG Humanism, and of course, personal data protection is really important, but open data may also pose risks to other fundamental rights, as also Roberto mentioned. So could you elaborate on that a bit, and how should we guarantee protection of fundamental rights within these data sets? Thank you.
So thank you very much, and I'm guilty of as charged. I'm also a lawyer, and if Chick them invite me, I immediately come. So thank you for the invitation, and thank you to IPA. So when we consider open data, based on what Veronica and Roberto already said, what we can see is that there is a clear link between open data and ensure, for example, the right to information, and linked to the right to information, obviously, the freedom of thought and freedom of expression. But already here, we also have to consider some potential risks that Eugene will talk about, which is, for example, data poisoning. These are open data. We have to check data quality, because otherwise there can be risks of discrimination, disinformation, and there can be no freedom of information, and people cannot make real informed choices if the data has been poisoned. And what we see currently with bots and disinformation, we see it at such a scale that it's a real risk, not only to citizens and groups, but also to companies, I must say, because they will be liable if there are issues with AI products or else that they are developing based on this open data. So this has to be taken into consideration. But obviously there are many societal benefits to open data, and this is why we're discussing it today, and this is why Veronica brought up. So another example that we can take, a concrete example, during the COVID pandemic, famous big tech pursued a program of data for good, and they helped in urban planning, because the point was to see how to identify where is the population and vulnerable population, elderly people, pregnant women, children, etc., compared to where medical and pharmaceutical service and facilities were, in order to make sure that there is an appropriate distance, or a distance that you can reach easily if there is a COVID emergency. So obviously we can see the big societal benefits of open data, but I must say it raises an issue here. What do we think about the fact that a private company has the necessary data to tell us for each areas how many pregnant women are there, how many children, how many disabled people or elderly people? Do they have the personal data of these persons? Is it problematic? The problem will be private mass surveillance. So this has also to be taken into consideration, and this is why, as mentioned by Roberto, we absolutely need safeguards. So open data can be good, but with the necessary safeguards. And here, obviously, with the examples that I gave you, we immediately think of the right to privacy, of course, the right to personal data protection, and you ask about remedies. So there are obvious remedies that we already know how to implement, such as data anonymization, but obviously, as you mentioned, we have to make sure that when we correlate data sets, the identity of the person cannot be uncovered, because people could be, the data could be for negative purposes, but there's also techniques to prevent and limit the extraction of personal data. So we have to make sure we identify risks, we assess them, and we mitigate them. But here I would also like to mention a slippery slope, because we shouldn't confuse open data and public data. This is not the same thing. So currently, right now, Meta has announced that it will use personal data from Instagram and Facebook to train its AI models. There are civil society organizations which have brought up the issue, such as NOYB. There is a court case before a German court, and the decision should come today. There is the Hamburg Data Protection Authority, which might activate an urgency procedure in order to suspend this training for 3 months, to have the time to assess what happens, and for all data protection authorities, together with the Irish Data Protection Authority, which is a competent one, to decide what should be the answer to this collection of personal data. So here, there might be huge issue. Why? Because once this personal data enter into AI system, this is basically irreversible. So due to the irreversibility, there are serious risks. And we also have to remember the objective of open data, why we had it. The advantages is to provide transparency and accountability. So we talked about what kind of data are concerned, personal data or non-personal data. Obviously, for personal data, the risks are increased. But the question, as we mentioned as well, is the data collected by whom? The government or big tech? And here we saw another very recent example, which is one of David Chavalarias. He's a researcher at the CNRS, and what he did is that he ensured the right to data portability, which means that for people who wanted to quit X, he created a technical tool to allow people to take their data and take them to other platforms such as Mastodon. He has been the object of a smear campaign, of a denigration campaign at a high level, so you can check it on LinkedIn. These are very serious matters because it put into question science and the legitimacy of science and what is true and what is false. So this has also to be considered. And here, open data shouldn't be a Trojan horse for big tech to collect ever more data. Open data for general interest, yes. Open data as a Trojan horse for big tech to collect data. Public data, not necessarily open data. Not necessarily. And I would like to finish by maybe enlarging the topic. As Veronica mentioned, we should see it in the broader ecosystem. What about open source? What about also AI model and systems? How they are, what is the logic of the systems? We have a lot of difficulty to get algorithmic transparency, which is a right, and we should have access to the necessary documents in order to see how these systems work. So when we talk about openness linked to transparency and accountability, it is good to see it in its ecosystem and broaden the discussion and make sure that all these parameters and all the openness and transparency and accountability are taken at every level to have a respect of the rule of law, basically. So that's what I would say.
Thanks, Karin. Thanks for bringing think and do perspective to us. Eugene, thank you for your patience. I know you have to catch your flight, so we will be short. So you are a cybersecurity expert and a businessman in Romania.
Thank you very much for your invitation, and I'm very glad to be here with you in this format and as well in this beautiful event. Thank you, AIPA. I will bring into discussion some cybersecurity aspects in a more general approach, but also tackling some of the ideas already mentioned by the previous speakers. I will talk about the risks and also the opportunities, because some risks have the potential to be constructive and help us in development and growth of multiple areas in our lives. And I will also focus on the humanistic side of the cybersecurity, the non-technical one, because the technical one basically remains unchanged. It is well known and matured in the industrial domain of study. Generally speaking, we build technology to externalize and expand our abilities. Earlier, I think Veronica mentioned that we need to offer some purpose to anything that we build. With traditional IT technology, for example, we have everything under control due to the fact that all the programming lines do exactly what is written in them. Now, AI technology is a bit different in the sense that it tends to offer outputs based on inferences and complex computations that are not under our direct control. No matter whether they are good or bad, we expect at some point to be more or less kind of a surprise when we receive their outputs. What is the relevance of the open data in this context? Well, open data propagates, and along with it, all its qualities and flaws propagate as well, and predispose the systems to create loopholes and self-amplified effects. Roberto mentioned earlier about the need to self-sustained development. For this, it is compulsory that the open data and the systems to ensure stable growth in the long run. Open data needs to propagate safety and stability, and also reliability. I offer you here a graph that I thought on my own in order to very simply explain our relation to the technology that we build. So we build technology to make our lives better, more comfortably, fundamentally. We want it to be easier and to allow us to use the time at will. We may find the ideal situation in the top right corner, where I envisaged a good working and autonomous AI system doing its job autonomously. But until then, what we actually have today is either the choice of doing things by our own, for which we have total control with a balance between comfort and workload, but no delegation or expansion of our abilities. In the same time, we have the legacy IT, which brings in a bit of automation and scaling, thus more comfort, but not enough to feel that we could delegate tasks to some trustful autonomous AI. And we also have an imperfect version of AI for the moment, which seems to be a good start for the practical implementations of the AI domain of study that has been developed in the past 40 years or so. But it's far from being what we aim for now. It needs constant double checks for its outputs. It needs thorough testing and certification, and many, many more requirements to actually ensure a common management and use as a mainstream technology. Here I agree with the Aselsan CEO, who said yesterday that nowadays AI is rather burdensome than comfortable. And we'll see in the next slides that in order to take AI from imperfection to autonomy will take us consistent efforts on multiple layers of social organization. Personally, I don't think there would be any shortcuts in this road to gain autonomous AI. We need to put in all the work. Cybersecurity covers both safety and security aspects. By safety, I mean unintentionality and vulnerabilities, and by security, I mean intentionality and threats. cybersecurity aims to protect people, resources, processes, and assets. The protection of assets is done through legacy cybersecurity. I already mentioned that there is nothing much changed in regards with the AI because the cybersecurity is already a major domain. Then the protection of processes is a bit more complicated. It's way too much information here, but I only, and according to, and comparing to the entire information that would be necessary to be presented is still too less here. But for example, we need to take care of protecting the entire life cycle of the technology, especially in the development phases. Veronica showed us earlier the high complexity requirements for the standardization frameworks, for example. Then the protection of the people side is even more complicated, but a bit more in our control, I would say. We can do things individually to protect ourselves while using AI to avoid any harmful impacts on our psyche or abilities. And we can build social institutions and mechanisms to ensure proper certification and compliance of data and systems to avoid the replication and propagation of the faulty ones. I will only mention here one of the most important, in my opinion, the locus of control. Where do we have the control of the processes? In our hands or in the technologies? So in my opinion, we better go forward and being the managers of technology, be in control of it, and not stay only as consumers and blindfolded consumers. The previous slides comprise only a glimpse of the entire spectrum of risks. So there are quite many of them. The tactics, techniques, and procedures of the attackers grow constantly. In the landscape of risks, we may see a plethora of opportunities for improvement also, for ourselves as individuals and for society as the ground for the Commonwealth. We have the opportunity to upgrade the security mechanisms on the supply chain of the digital technology. We have the opportunity to rethink responsibility in the development processes. We have the opportunity to become a better version of ourselves as individual beings with a higher sense of critical thinking and a sharper self-awareness. And we have the opportunity to build new institutions adapted to the technological realities of the present moment. As key takeaways, I strongly encourage states to develop bodies for certification of data quality. Of course, I recommend all the developers to take full responsibility in the entire development lifecycle, and for us as users to analyze and double-check the AI outputs. And as I said earlier, we shall be more managers rather than consumers. In the end, I reiterate the obvious. We all expect AI to make our lives more comfortable and luxurious, and I think we can do it, at least by making sure we always deploy high data quality and algorithm robustness. Thank you.
Thank you, Eugene. Thanks for being short. Cybersecurity is at the heart of safe AI always, so thank you. So thanks for being with us today. We value, your cooperation. You're here with us. Thank you very much. And as I say, when data is digital, it has no borders. So we must cooperate internationally, globally. So let's cooperate. Thank you. Thanks for being with us. Çok sağ olun.
Konuklarımıza çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Hediye takdimimiz olacak. Hediyelerini takdim etmek üzere Sayın Zafer Küçükşabanoğlu ve Medya İletişim Komisyonu Başkanı Derya Gül Ünlü'yü alkışlarınızla sahneye davet ediyoruz. Evet, bu oturumumuzun adı Açık Veri ve Yapay Zeka'ydı. Burada dataların yapay zekanın gelişimi için önemi vurgulandı. Açık veriler sayesinde ihtiyaçlar belirlenebiliyor. Burada da son dönemlerde yaşadığımız korona vakasından bahsedildi. Örneğin bu vakanın sürecinde kimler, hangi yaş grubu daha çok etkilendi? Bu tarz başlıkların, verilerin oldukça gelişim açısından önemi altı çizildi. Ama tabii ki bu veriler toplanırken belli riskler var. Örneğin kişisel bilgilerin açığa çıkması, sızması, istenmeyen başka alanlarda kullanılması gibi. O yüzden burada da şeffaflığın oldukça önemli olduğunun altı çizildi. Konuklarımızın ödüllerinin takdiminin ardından da kısa bir aramız olacak. Sadece Türkiye'den değil, dünyanın dört bir yanından ağırlıyoruz konuklarımızı da. Böylelikle zirvemizin ulaştığı alanlar çok daha geniş kitleler oluyor. Ödüllerimiz takdim edildi. Toplu bir fotoğraf günün hatırasında yeniden gerçekleştiriyoruz. Evet, çok teşekkür ediyoruz herkese de. Değerli konuklar, bu oturumumuzla birlikte öğle yemeği arası veriyoruz. Saat 14'te yeniden burada buluşmak için sizleri bekliyor olacağız. Hoşça kalın, şimdiden afiyet olsun.